As a complicated history combines with contemporary provocation, can Japan and China keep the peace? A recent statement saying Tokyo could intervene to protect Taiwan stands at the core of escalating tension. As Japan invests more in its military, China steps up its forces' activity near Japanese waters. So could the two be edging closer to actual conflict? I'm Andrea Sankey, and this is the Newsmakers. In the immediate wake of the Japanese Prime Minister's statement on Taiwan, Beijing halted Japanese seafood imports, canceled movies and concerts, and even issued a travel warning. It's not the first time the two have engaged in antagonistic behavior, but given the volatility of the South China Sea right now, some fear it's a dangerous step toward real confrontation. As Japan moves to reinforce its military in a way unseen since World War II, China is calling on post-war treaties to be respected. But have times changed too much for those agreements to hold up? Here's a look.
For decades, relations between Japan and China have been described as cold politics, hot economics. Rivals in security, partners in trade, a tense balance that both sides managed to live with. But now careful diplomacy has turned into hostility. It was sparked by a surprise remark by Japan's new Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi. In late November, she told a parliamentary meeting that Japan could intervene militarily if China attacked Taiwan, calling such an invasion a direct threat to Japan's security. For Beijing, this was open interference in what it considers an internal matter.
The erroneous remarks on Taiwan made by Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi seriously violate international law and basic norms governing international relations and blatantly challenge the outcomes of World War II victory and international justice. The dangerous trend of reviving Japanese militarism has put regional countries and peoples on high alert.
Since World War II, Japan's constitution limits its military to defensive action only. So when Takaichi suggested Japan could act during a Taiwan conflict, constitutional lines began to blur. In Beijing, first came diplomatic anger. Then Chinese citizens were advised not to travel to Japan. China also delayed plans to resume Japanese seafood imports. And then, a Chinese carrier group sailed past the southern Japanese island of Okinawa and into the Pacific. Japan's self-defense forces say Chinese aircraft conducted nearly 100 takeoffs and landings over a single weekend. Multiple Japanese fighter jets were scrambled, some of which Tokyo claims were targeted by Chinese aircraft.
China's radar lock-on was a dangerous act exceeding the scope necessary for the safe flight of aircraft, and it is extremely regrettable that such an incident occurred. We strongly protested to the Chinese side, and we have sternly demanded that it not occur. We will respond calmly and resolutely.
Takaichi's tough stance is boosting her politically. Polls show her approval rating rising as she projects strength toward Beijing. And behind it all is the bigger power struggle, a struggle not just over islands or airspace, but over regional leadership, national pride, and competing visions of power in Asia.
So can peace prevail over antagonism? Well, joining me now to debate that and more are from Tokyo, specially appointed professor of the University of Tsukuba, Tomohiko Taniguchi. He also served as special advisor to former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. And from Beijing, senior fellow at Tahe Institute, Einar Tangen. Thank you both so much for being with me. Let's get a better idea first of how seriously all of this is being taken in both capitals, because it seems Japan thinks this should, in a sense, all blow over, while China truly sees it as a dangerous interference in its internal affairs. So Tomohiko Taniguchi, which is it?
Well, it is not as bad as the media makes it sound. there were worse periods. For instance, in 2005, Japanese Consulate General Office in Shanghai was attacked by a huge number of mobs. That's one. And around 2013, uh, uh, about the issue around the Senkaku Islands, the Chinese imposed a ban on rare earth minerals exportation to Japan. And at the same time, the authority in Beijing uh, arrested two Japanese company executives. Nothing of that nature has happened. Yes, tourism has been discouraged. The exchange students going to Japan, are also being told not to this time. But economically speaking, no serious damage has been done. And also, the military confrontation is no news. It's been going on since 2008. Almost daily, the Chinese official boats are trying to enter Japanese territorial waters or Japanese contiguous waters. So I wouldn't agree that this row is something unprecedented.
Okay. Unprecedented, maybe not, but Einar, some of the voices out of Beijing have been very strong, saying that this is to be taken quite seriously, and Japan needs to be seriously warned. Where do you stand?
So, looking at this with a very jaundiced eye, what they see here is that Donald Trump, together with Japan, is trying to cause trouble. Mostly, Donald Trump to get leverage. He was not successful in tariffs, and now he's in a situation where instead of going directly against Beijing, he is going to South America, Africa, and now, of course, Japan, trying to upset the status quo, try to put his motion and see what happens and shakes out. So from Beijing's point of view, this is serious because it's not just that she said something, threatened the peace. The existing 4 documents that were signed by Japan acknowledging that there's only one China and that any kind of disputes would be handled in.
Okay, well, unfortunately, we've lost Einar's connection. We're going to get him reconnected. As soon as we do, I'll come back to Einar. So let me ask the professor then. Here we're hearing that it's not just about China and Japan. That's why this is more serious. The United States is involved. Globally, things are escalating. Does that make you more concerned when you consider the other international geopolitical angles involved?
I am not sure if I could agree with that on that point, because Donald Trump has been extremely keen on making the upcoming summit meeting between Xi and Trump a huge success. So Donald Trump actually has not escalated any tension. On the contrary, he has been saying that, wait a minute, let's take time and be calmer, those sorts of things. It is true that the newly published National Security Strategy of the United States spelled out an issue about Taiwan, but even that is no news because the United States government has been doing something like that for many years. So tension, it is there, but it's been under control. Nothing to be really, really serious about.
Okay, then we have Einar connected. Einar, let me ask you, I mean, contrary to what I was interpreting you were saying there, the Trump administration is more of a calming force when it comes to tensions between China and Japan.
I don't think that that's the case because you not only have to look outside of Japan, exactly what they're doing in South America, insisting that countries give up their trade with China, insisting that Europe do the same. This is classic Trump. He doesn't have the cards to go play with Beijing directly. Yes, he does want to have a big meeting with Xi, and he loves state visits and lots of people marching around. But the fact is, he thinks he's being cute. I don't agree at all with my colleague when he says that there's nothing to worry about. There is a lot to worry about. What I was going to say earlier is that China's in a position where the world is looking for them to leadership against a bully. And Japan should know this very well because they have been bullied themselves. So instead of standing up to the US, Japan is giving in, and China has to stand strong.
And Professor, I'd like you to respond to that then. Is Japan being bullied and somehow just giving in to US demands here? I'm sorry, Japan being bullied?
Well, it's pretty much, it is pretty much a separate issue. However, let me just point out, it is the Trump administration that has come to acknowledge that NVIDIA should export one of its most advanced semiconductors to China. This is not something you could call bullying over China. And as regards U.S.-Japan relations, Japan's been there, done that country vis-a-vis the United States. The situations in the 1970s, 80s, and early 1990s were much, much, much worse than what you see today. So I don't think there is anything that should deserve to be over-exaggerated.
It's so interesting to hear these two distinct perspectives. And Einar, let's try your connection again, because there is a lot China has said about not just what's happening contemporarily between China and Japan, but historically there are still grievances here that can easily agitate both countries on a military level, not least the Senkaku Islands, as Japan calls them. They are very close to Taiwanese territory, and that's what this comes back to, is, Japan mentioning that it would, if it needs to intervene in any Chinese military action toward Taiwan, it will.
Well, I mean, Japan does not have off on this idea that China back in 72, then in 78, then in 98, and then 2008. So this idea that somehow it's come into question is just revisionism. I cannot but help but draw the connection between Donald Trump's visit to Japan shortly before he went to Busan and what's happening here. Now, one of the things that really, really bothers China is exactly the kind of attitude of my colleague. Is it'll go well. This is the same thing that they're saying about the rape of Nanjing. This coming just a week, less than a week after the 88th anniversary of this massacre, and the fact that China lost 35 million people directly and indirectly because of Japan's aggression. It really does not work here. And I'm talking about the public. I'm not talking just about Beijing and the elites there. I mean, this kind of attitude, don't worry about it. You shouldn't be talking about this. Nothing's bad. We suffered under the U.S. in 1985, 86 when they were forced us to sign the Plaza Accord. And now our economy is actually worth less in real dollar terms than it was in 1986. But these are the types of excuses that I'm used to. But I'm afraid it doesn't play well when you get to Beijing.
So, Professor, I mean, that is a common accusation of the Chinese against Japan, saying that Japan would prefer to forget a lot of the history, perhaps pretend that it doesn't need apologizing for it, should just be left behind, while China still sees those grievances as very much relevant today. And meanwhile, Japan's constitution says its military can only act in self-defense because of historical issues. So I don't know. Is China potentially China invading Taiwan, which is more than 2,000 kilometers away from Tokyo? Is there a way Japan can see that to qualify as a need for self-defense?
The law the Japanese Prime Minister has cited clearly stipulates that if the third country, which is closely related to Japan's own national security, that is to say, the United States, gets involved and gets attacked by the other country, then Tokyo would consider seriously to act as a single collective unit with the United States. Never once has anyone from the Japanese government said anything like, yes, we would come to help rescue Taiwan. So it's not in the law. However, if Taiwan has been under attack, what's going to happen with a huge number of Japanese people living on that island? How could we uh, evacuate those people without working closely with the United States and possibly with the Taiwanese military authority? Those things are legitimate concerns that any leader uh, neighboring China must always consider.
Einar, go ahead.
Yeah, these are the kind of thoughts and things that were said during just prior to World War II, when Japan was out there, basically buccaneering, going over not only China but Korea and other places. I mean, and this is really what people fear, is the rise of fascism. This idea that I can attack you to protect myself. This was always, the way that Japan said they attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, quote, because they needed to protect themselves. And this is the same exact narrative. And this conversation is what bothers Beijing. You're going back to the future. We thought that fascism and that Japan had been curtailed from its kind of manifest destiny idea 80 years ago. And now we see it rising again. And my colleague is using the exact same narrative.
Professor, go ahead.
Well, I have been extremely puzzled hearing my colleague based in Beijing accusing Japan as becoming nearly a fascist nation. Come see through your own eyes where there is any single trait of Japan becoming a fascist nation. Well, the opposite is the case. I have been constantly troubled by the lack of patriotic feelings among the Japanese people. You will see kids who cannot sing Japanese national anthem. It's I'm laughing because the accusation that I have just heard is so otherworldly. And when it comes to Japan-China relationship, uh, we must remind the audience that Japanese military government back in the 1944, 45, 46, those times surrendered not to the Chinese Communist Party, but the Republic of China. And important documents that Beijing is now citing are the ones that Japan accepted well before Mao Zedong declared the establishment of the People's Republic of China in 1949. Don't be so much creative about interpreting history.
Okay, and Andrew, if I may, I mean, he says there's no fascism going on. How about the revision of history books? How about going to the Yagashuni Shrine and worshiping these war criminals, which were installed there after they had been raised? I mean, the issue has never fully gone away. Now, this whole
All
idea
right,
that we should not be concerned.
I have chosen to
Go ahead.
appear on this TV show in order to discuss what's going on now. But I don't know who I am talking to, but my colleague from Beijing is accusing many other things instead of focusing your attention on the current row. So yes, I would like to defend Japan on whatever you say, but it's a waste of time for me, and I would like to say bye bye. And I'm not. My time is precious, and I'm not here to discuss those rubbish.
I think, what's interesting, though, about hearing these perspectives, Professor, is that China seems to see things in a much broader view. And Japan is looking specifically, like you're saying, at this issue right now, and maybe.
Listen.
And I'm not sure if it's worth bringing the complexities in the way China might feel that is necessary in deciding action going forward, but it's something that does have to be considered, because if it is their perspective and they act on that, it can be a danger to Japan as well.
The basic factor is China is building its military arsenal much faster and much swifter than anything humans have ever seen in the long history. Chinese military is bigger, 10 times as bigger as Japan's. There is a growing submarine fleet gap between the Chinese submarine fleet and the fleet that the United States possesses. And it is in China that no other views are tolerated than believing the party line, exactly the line that the gentleman on the Beijing side is now citing. I'm hearing exactly the party line that I have heard many times from the Chinese Communist Party members. But that's it. Envelope has been pushed by the Chinese. Provocations have been forged by the Chinese to the Japanese. This row is not an isolated incident. It's been going on almost daily. Why there has been no news? Because the Japanese have been very much restrained, and the seamanship shown by Japanese Coast Guard vessels, crew, and Japanese self-defense forces has been awesome. There has been no incident, but the intrusion of Chinese aircraft into Japanese airspace, vessels into Japanese waters, have been a daily phenomenon. And the Japanese, needless to say, have done nothing of that sort vis-a-vis China.
Einar, let me ask you this. Would China ever feel compelled to act preemptively in foreseeing a Japanese military buildup, backed by the United States? We know that the U.S. is supplying weapons to Japan. So, i.e., attack while the military in Japan is relatively much weaker than China's.
No, I just can't see it. I mean, it goes against everything they stand for. For my colleagues' edification, I'm an American citizen and I appear on over 50 channels around the world, not here. I'm not a spokesman for the Chinese side. And, his jingoism about how great Japan's self-defense forces are, well, they were disarmed because of what they did in World War II. And he doesn't seem to be able to reflect on that. Now, yes, I don't need to discuss anything I don't want to discuss. I don't need to understand China's perspective. But China has not been the one causing wars, nor has been backing any. It has studiously refrained from that, saying that the only way that you can have peace is talks, not through tanks. So this idea that Japan is simply defending itself against a larger neighbor is nonsense. I noticed that he keeps saying that there are daily incursions and that China doesn't really name them and just says, oh, it's all due to this idea. This is ridiculous. It's here.
Okay.
That is that Japan started a row, and now it's finding it very hard to get out. And the difficulty here is that it's going to have to take the economic side in order to remove what is going to be, in essence, she may be popular now, but she won't be popular when the economic bite hits.
Professor Taniguchi, we have 1 minute left, so I'll let you have your final thoughts. Go ahead.
Well, I am saying points that can be verified by facts. The fact is, it is the Chinese that have provoked Japan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. None of these countries, Vietnam, the Philippines, and Japan, has provoked from their side the Chinese sovereign integrity. It is always the Chinese. And the Chinese are building a massive arsenal. The fourth aircraft carrier is in the pipeline, and the rumor goes that it is going to be nuclear powered. So it's a very much awesome and dangerous situation. The Philippines, Japan, and the United States are now joining hands together as a result.
Okay. Unfortunately, that is going to have to be the final word for this edition of the Newsmakers. Einar, I'm so sorry. We're obviously having severe technical issues with your line, but I think you got your thoughts across, and they're greatly appreciated. So thanks to both of my panelists and our viewers for joining us as well. Remember, you can follow us on social media, and do be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I'm Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.